So far, in this course, we've completed our exploration of social engineering and how attackers manipulate human psychology, and now we're shifting to one of the most devastating and profitable forms of cyber attack, ransomware. Ransomware is malicious software that encrypts your data and holds it hostage until you pay a ransom. But it's evolved far beyond simple malware. It's now a sophisticated criminal industry with business models, specialized roles, customer service operations, and revenue streams measured in billions of dollars annually. In this lesson, we cover the ransomware business model and why this form of attack has become so prevalent and profitable. Ransomware is fairly straightforward. Attackers deploy malicious software that encrypts files on infected systems, making them inaccessible to the legitimate owner. The attacker then demands payment, typically in cryptocurrency, in exchange for the decryption key. Without the key, the encrypted data is essentially unrecoverable. Modern ransomware uses strong encryption algorithms that are mathematically unbreakable without the proper key. You cannot simply hire a tech expert to crack the encryption. It would take longer than the age of the universe to break through brute force. This leaves victims with impossible choices. Pay the ransom with no guarantee the attacker will actually provide decryption, attempt to recover from backups if they exist and weren't also compromised, or rebuild everything from scratch, accepting the complete loss of encrypted data. Ransomware has evolved dramatically over the past decade. Early ransomware was relatively unsophisticated. It spread indiscriminately through spam emails or compromised websites. Infected individual computers demanded small ransoms like $300 to $500 and often failed to properly decrypt files even after payment. Modern ransomware is targeted, strategic, and professional. Attackers research organizations before attacking. They compromise networks weeks or months before deploying encryption. They steal data before encrypting it, enabling double extortion. They demand ransoms calculated based on the victim's revenue and cyber insurance limits. They provide professional negotiation services and actually decrypt files after payment to maintain their reputation. This evolution reflects ransomware's transformation from opportunistic crime into organized criminal enterprise. The ransomware economy now operates on a service model similar to legitimate software businesses. Ransomware as a service platforms separate malware development from deployment. Developers create the ransomware software and maintain infrastructure for payment processing, encryption key management, and victim communication. Affiliates gain access to the ransomware, identify and compromise targets, deploy the malware, and negotiate with victims. Revenue is split between developers and affiliates, typically 20 to 30% to developers and 70 to 80% to affiliates. Both parties profit from successful attacks without needing the full skill set required for the entire operation. This specialization has dramatically increased ransomware prevalence. Affiliates don't need to know how to develop malware. They just need to compromise networks. Developers don't need to find victims. They just maintain the platform and collect their percentage. The ransomware as a service affiliate model has created a structured criminal ecosystem with specialized roles. Initial access brokers specialize in compromising networks and selling that access to ransomware affiliates. They might use phishing, exploit vulnerabilities, or purchase stolen credentials. Once inside, they sell access for thousands to tens of thousands of dollars depending on the target size and value. Ransomware operators take that access and move laterally through networks, escalate privileges, disable security tools, and deploy the encryption payload. They conduct the technical work of the attack. Negotiators handle victim communication, ransom demands, and payment processing. They're skilled at psychological pressure and understand how to maximize payment while maintaining the brand reputation of actually providing decryption. Money launderers convert cryptocurrency ransom payments into usable currency through mixing services, exchanges, and various obfuscation techniques. Each specialist focuses on their expertise, creating an efficient criminal operation. Ransomware Ransomware operators don't choose ransom amounts arbitrarily. They're calculated based on that victim research, like we mentioned earlier. They analyze publicly available financial information to estimate revenue. They research cyber insurance coverage limits, since insurers often negotiate and pay ransoms. They assess the criticality of encrypted systems and data. They evaluate the victim's apparent ability to recover from backups. They consider the time sensitivity. Organizations that absolutely cannot afford downtime face higher demands. Initial ransom demands typically start high, with expectations of negotiation. A healthcare provider might face a $10 million initial demand, a mid-sized business $2 to $5 million, a small organization $500,000 to $1 million. The amounts are calibrated to be painful but potentially payable, high enough to generate significant profit, low enough that paying seems more practical than recovery alternatives. Ransomware attacks include surprisingly professional negotiation processes. After encryption, victims receive instructions for contacting the attackers through secure chat platforms or dark websites. The initial message includes proof of encryption, the ransom demand, payment instructions, and often a deadline creating urgency. Victims can negotiate. They claim inability to pay the demanded amount, request proof the attackers can decrypt files, ask for discounts, or request payment plans. Attackers often reduce demands substantially during negotiation. 30 to 50% reductions are common. This negotiation theater serves multiple purposes. It makes victims feel they've achieved something through negotiation, increasing the likelihood of payment. It demonstrates the attackers are reasonable, building trust that they'll actually provide decryption. It creates a sense that the attacker understands the victim's constraints. The attackers maintain professional demeanor throughout. They respond to messages promptly, provide decryption of sample files to prove they have the keys, and occasionally even provide technical support, helping victims purchase cryptocurrency or navigate payment processes. Successful ransomware operations invest in reputation and customer service because their business model depends on victims believing payment will result in decryption. If a ransomware group consistently fails to provide decryption after payment, word spreads and victims stop paying. The group's revenue collapses. Therefore, established ransomware operations actually decrypt files after payment most of the time. They provide decryption tools, technical support for running these tools, assistance if decryption fails or encounters errors, and sometimes even cybersecurity advice to prevent future infections. This seems paradoxical. Criminals providing customer service, but it's rational business behavior. Their product is decryption, and satisfied customers who pay are better for business than dissatisfied customers who spread word that payment doesn't work. Some ransomware groups even offer customer reviews and maintain reputations on dark web forums where they're discussed and rated by security researchers and victims. Modern ransomware increasingly uses double extortion tactics that make paying ransoms more likely even for organizations with good backups. Before encrypting the data, attackers exfiltrate copies. They then threaten not only to withhold decryption, but also to publish the stolen data if ransom is not paid. This data includes sensitive customer information, financial records, trade secrets, confidential communication, and embarrassing internal documents. Publishing this data causes harm separate from the encryption: regulatory fines for data breaches, lawsuits from affected customers, competitive harm from exposed trade secrets, and reputational damage from public exposure of confidential information. Organizations with perfect backups who could recover without paying the encryption ransom still face enormous pressure to pay to prevent data publication. This has made ransomware significantly more effective and profitable. Some ransomware operations now employ triple extortion, adding a third pressure point. After threatening to publish stolen data, they contact the victim's customers, partners, or other affected third parties and demand payment from them as well. Your vendor was breached and your data was stolen. Pay us or we publish it. This distributes the ransom burden across multiple entities and increases total revenue. Even if the primary victim refuses to pay, individual customers might pay to protect their information. Some operations have even added DDoS attacks as a fourth pressure point, disrupting the victim's operation while negotiating to increase desperation. There's a relevant quote from the sociologist Max Weber. In his lecture, Politics as a Vocation, he wrote, "The state is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory." Weber was defining what makes a state, the monopoly on legitimate violence. But ransomware reveals a challenge to this monopoly in the digital realm. Ransomware operators effectively hold organizations and data hostage through digital force. They make demands backed by the threat of destruction, permanent encryption, or exposure, data publication, and they collect payment for releasing their hostages. This is digital extortion at scale, but it operates largely outside state jurisdiction because attackers operate from jurisdictions that don't prosecute them, use cryptocurrency that's difficult to trace, and target victims globally from safe havens. The traditional state monopoly on force doesn't extend effectively into cyberspace, creating an environment where non-state criminal actors can employ force, digital hostage taking, profitably, and with relative impunity. Ransomware generates extraordinary returns compared to other criminal activities. The operational costs are relatively low. Developing ransomware requires technical expertise, but happens once and services many attacks. Compromising networks requires time, but not significant capital. Infrastructure costs are minimal. The potential returns are enormous. A single successful attack against a major organization can generate millions in ransom payment. A moderately active ransomware operation might execute dozens of attacks annually, generating tens or hundreds of millions in revenue. The risk to reward ratio favors attackers. They operate from jurisdictions that don't prosecute cybercrime. They use cryptocurrency that obscures payment trails. They rarely face meaningful consequences even when identified. Compare this to traditional organized crime like drug trafficking, which requires physical infrastructure, faces significant law enforcement risk, and operates in competitive, violent markets. Ransomware offers better returns with less risk. Organizations face perverse economics that often make paying ransoms the most rational financial decision. Recovery costs for major ransomware attacks can reach millions even with backups. System reconstruction, forensic investigation, incident response, legal fees, regulatory compliance, customer notification, reputation management, and business disruption costs accumulate rapidly. Ransom payments might cost less than recovery, especially when negotiated down from initial demands. Cyber insurance often covers ransom payments, making the decision even easier financially. Downtime costs can be catastrophic. Healthcare providers face persistent safety issues. Manufacturers lose production. Killers lose sales. Municipal governments can't provide services. The pressure to restore operations quickly often outweighs security concerns about paying criminals. This economic reality is why ransomware remains profitable despite decades of never pay ransoms advice from law enforcement and security professionals. The cyber insurance has paradoxically made ransomware more profitable. Insurance provides funds that make paying ransoms financially viable. Organizations that couldn't otherwise afford million-dollar ransoms can pay because insurance covers most of the cost. Attackers research which organizations have cyber insurance and what coverage limits their policies include. They calibrate ransom demands to align with insurance limits, knowing insurers will likely negotiate and pay. Insurance companies face pressure to pay because paying ransom is often cheaper than covering full recovery costs. So we're creating a cycle where insurance enables ransom payments, which makes ransomware profitable, which encourages more attacks, which increases insurance premiums. Some insurance policies now exclude ransomware or impose restrictions on ransom payments to break this cycle, but the insurance-ransomware relationship has significantly contributed to the problem's growth. Ransomware operators carefully choose targets based on the likelihood of payment and the potential ransom amounts. Healthcare organizations are attractive because they can't afford downtime that affects patient care. Critical infrastructure targets face enormous pressure to restore services quickly. Professional services firms depend on access to data for their business operations. Manufacturing and logistics companies lose massive revenue during production stoppages. Attackers avoid certain targets, government agencies that rarely pay, organizations in sectors with strong security that make compromise difficult, entities in jurisdictions that aggressively prosecute cybercrime, and organizations with reputations for refusing payment and recovering from backups. This targeting is strategic strategic, not random. Attackers invest effort where return is most likely. Established ransomware groups maintain brands and reputations within the criminal ecosystem. Revil, DarkSide, Conti, Lockbit, and other groups have name recognition and reputation that affects their success. Known for reliable decryption get paid more often. Groups with poor reputation struggle to collect ransoms. This reputation economy creates market discipline. Ransomware groups that don't decrypt after payment lose business. That decrypt reliably maintain market position. Some groups even rebrand after PR disasters or law enforcement actions, attempting to preserve their decryption reputation while escaping negative associations. Collecting and converting ransom payments requires sophisticated infrastructure. Attackers provide detailed instructions for purchasing cryptocurrency, transferring payments to specified wallets, and confirming transactions. They might offer assistance or recommend specific exchanges. After receiving payment, they must convert cryptocurrency to usable currency through mixing services that obscure transaction origins, exchanges in jurisdictions with weak anti-money laundering enforcement, and gradual conversion through multiple transactions and wallets. This infrastructure requires technical sophistication and understanding of cryptocurrency systems, financial regulations, and law enforcement capabilities. So the safe havens for operators that we mentioned previously helps ransomware to thrive. Russia and former Soviet states have historically tolerated cybercrime targeting Western countries. North Korea uses ransomware as a revenue source for the regime. Other jurisdictions lack capacity to investigate and prosecute sophisticated cybercrime. Attackers operate openly from these locations, advertising services on Russian language forums, maintaining public infrastructure, and facing no meaningful law enforcement pressure as long as they target foreign victims. This geographic asymmetry, attacking from safe havens against targets in jurisdictions that criminalize such activity, creates an enforcement gap that enables the ransomware economy. So ultimately, understanding ransomware as a business model rather than random crime should inform your defensive strategies. You're not preventing attacks through technical controls alone. You're trying to make your organization a less attractive target than alternatives by increasing the difficulty of compromise, reducing the likelihood of payment through reliable backups and recovery procedures, and creating uncertainty about whether attack investment will generate return. All organizations should assume they will eventually face ransomware attempts. The question is not if, but when, so preparation matters more than prevention. So now that you understand the business model and economic drivers, in the next lesson we'll explore how attackers gain the initial access to networks before deploying ransomware.